Okay, so it seems like everybody can hear and see me okay. So we'll go ahead and get started here.
Can everybody hear me okay? That should be a little bit better. Okay, perfect. So before we jump in, there's a couple of things I want to bring up. So the first is, what is phishing, right? It's a form of fraud in which an attacker masquerades as a reputable entity or person through email or other forms of communication, and we'll get into what those other forms of communication are during the course of this training session. Now, one of the biggest phishing attacks that ever happened was targeting against Facebook and Google between 2013 and 2015. And it cost over $100 million, and it took 2 years for them to figure it out. So this is not small potatoes. They can be really, really big events too. And why am I sharing this with you? Well, it's simple, because phishing is the easiest way for hackers to scam you. And if the people at Google and the people at Facebook, who are, we would assume pretty smart, if they fell for it, anybody could. So we're going to jump into the 7 things every CEO must do to protect themselves online, and the simple steps that you can take to protect your identity, your reputation, and your bank account. So first off, why are hackers interested in you? As in, why are they trying to hack you specifically and not other people on your team? Well, there's 3 reasons: your identity, your privileges, and your authority. So let's dig into this a little bit more and unpack everything. What do they want with your identity? Well, they can file fake tax returns with the CRA so that they end up getting refund money that should be showing up in your bank account. They can access credit cards. One of the tricks is they get the bank to issue a replacement card to them instead of you, and then they go and use it to buy things. Another one is they can register new credit cards, and these can actually go for weeks or months before being detected. Usually after the bill isn't paid and they start coming after you for payment, that's when you find out. They might open lines of credit in your name. And another one that we've been seeing is accessing medical benefits, such as prescription drugs or even like extensive dental work using somebody's fake identity. So these are things. And then in terms of privileges, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about your access to your user accounts at your office, such as Microsoft 365, for example. And this is where they can download all your email, your contacts, your calendar events, you name it. They can also access your computer network and get more things of value. And you might even have administrative access since you're a CEO or a high-level executive. And that means they'll be able to do more things on the network than they could with a normal user account. And finally, most CEOs have access to human resources data, or they have the authority to ask the HR department to send them this data, and that can then be copied out and used for other nefarious purposes. Now, speaking of authority, what might they do with your authority? Well, they could get your team to buy gift cards. I'm sure you've probably seen different tactics around that already. It's been pretty well covered in the news. They might get a vendor or a customer to update payment information so the money goes to the wrong place. Like I mentioned before, they might convince human resources to send confidential data. They could add new vendors for payment. And they could even have your team wire money directly to them. Now, going over the 7 things that every CEO must do to protect themselves, we're going to go through and say how to recognize a phish. That's what we're going to cover first. And then how to protect your passwords and keeping your MS365 account safe. Then we're going to talk about avoiding smishing, and I'll go into what that is, avoiding multi-factor authentication bypass techniques, how to protect your personal information, and then lastly, knowing if you've been hacked. Okay, so first we're going to go through and talk about how to recognize a phish. So phishing is basically a way that they try to get you to let them into the network, right? They're basically using a hook and they're hoping you'll bite. It's also known as clone phishing. This is just generic phishing. It casts a pretty wide net So they're sending out thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of messages, and it's just a numbers game. They don't know who that they're going to get, but they just hope that they'll get a few people out of every certain number that they send. They may impersonate common vendors such as banks, PayPal, Amazon, QuickBooks, other software companies, people that you might deal with. And there's going to be a proportion of any group that is going to deal with that specific institution or company and may fall for it. They're generally fairly easy to detect because there's some signs, and we'll go through what those are a little bit later. The second type is called spear phishing. Now, these are more focused. They're personalized either to an organization or to a specific individual. And sometimes they include email transactions with other organizations whose systems have been compromised, and they use that as a way to get into another company that they deal with. And then the last type of phishing is called executive whaling. Now, this is the one we're most concerned about here. And when you're protecting a CEO or a high-level executive, it's very targeted. They use detailed knowledge about you and your organization. This makes them the hardest to recognize of all the types. And the attackers that are doing these, they typically only go after a handful of high-profile targets each week, as opposed to the thousands or hundred thousands or millions that they might with the less sophisticated, less detailed types of attacks. So these are the ones to really watch out for, and because they're very hard to recognize. However, they all generally work the same way. And so we'll talk about these things and you'll see. So the first thing, in order to be successful phishing expedition, it needs to be believable, right? So if you got something like this from Amazon, would you click on it? If the answer is yes, then we'll need to dig into this a bit further. The second component is they're urgent. And what I mean by this is something like your bank telling you you're going to need to address something that happened on your account right away. You know, there's a sense of urgency. And then the last component is that they're emotional, right? So if you got a message like this alert about someone accessing your mail account and urging you to click here to investigate, chances are you might be tempted to click that. And that's what they're trying to make happen. And that's why these are so successful. So how do you protect yourself from these? Well, the first thing is slow down. Now, I know you're super busy and you probably think multitasking is the best way to get everything done that you need to get done in a day. But I promise you that when it comes to phishing expeditions, you should definitely take your foot off the gas. What I would suggest doing is that if you ever feel like something or someone is trying to get you to do something right away, take a deep breath, you know, think about it, and then maybe share it with someone else on your team or a colleague or, you know, family member and say, do you think this is legitimate? Does this look legitimate? Does this look like a scam? Another thing you can do is hover over the email links to see the details of where they really go, because where they actually go and where they appear to go are not always the same thing. Another one is don't click links in emails. The safest thing to do is to copy and paste them into your browser, into the address bar at the top. And then that way you can see where they go before you hit enter and actually go to them. So if there's anything fishy, then just don't go, right? Don't click enter. Never ever use phone numbers from emails. In a lot of cases, we're seeing that the phone numbers they put in the email, it's actually going to the hacker, not to the person or the company that it's supposed to be. So you call up to validate, you know, is this actually a legitimate message? You're talking to the hacker or one of their associates, not to the company. And they're very crafty at making this look really, really good. Okay, so here's some things to watch out for. An illegitimate or unfamiliar email address or a name. So if the name and the email address don't match, or, you know, if the domain is the part after the @ sign isn't what you think it should be, just be careful with those. Another one is, like I mentioned before, sense of urgency, something saying action required, do this now, that kind of thing. Another one is a generic greeting. This is common on sort of regular fishing and even on spear fishing. On whaling expeditions, it probably won't be as generic because they know your name and they are targeting you specifically. So you'll probably see your actual name there. Another one is spelling and grammar mistakes. This used to be really, really common, but as these guys have got more sophisticated, the attackers have got more sophisticated, and especially for whaling expeditions, because they're putting a lot of effort into it, they've learned how to use those spelling and grammar checkers like everyone else, and this makes them sound like native English speakers. So you can't always rely on that, but if you do see it, it's a good giveaway. Another one is suspicious links, as I mentioned before, or links that don't match the destination. So what you do is you hover over them. I can see the little arrow here, and you can see that what it says it's going to and then where it's actually going to are not the same. So that would be a dead giveaway right there. And then the last one is unexpected attachments, especially exe files, which are basically program files. This is a surefire sign that someone is trying to get into your system. Okay, so we've covered how to recognize a fish. Now let's talk about how to protect your passwords. Now, did you know 4 out of 5 breaches are linked to insecure passwords? That's a staggering statistic, isn't it? Okay, so if you think about it, your passwords create easy access for attackers because they basically, it's one of the things they're hunting for. If they can get your username and your password, they can get into most things. One of the ways that they do this is by trying to guess random passwords. This is known as a brute force attack. So basically they just use very sophisticated dictionary systems and whatever, and they just keep trying one password after another and different combinations. And, you know, the program can do this automatically for hours or days or weeks, you know, on and on and on. So if you have a simple password or a password that's based on something in real life, this could actually be an easy way for an attacker to gain access to your system. These are the most easily broken. And if you're ever not sure about whether your password is good or not, there are quite a few password checkers on the internet from reputable companies. You can just Google for one. Never put your username in those because the password on its own is no good to anybody if they don't know what it's for. All right, so just, or you could even try typing in something similar to what the password you're thinking of using and just see how it sort of ranks that one. And you'd be surprised how quickly a lot of passwords that you think might be complicated could actually be broken. Another way that they get it is they can buy them on the dark web, right? This can be a way of getting into a system. And there's a lot of systems out there that are not secured anything more than just a username and a password. And then other insecure passwords, they result in movement. So once they get into a system, they can try to find passwords that are saved there insecurely, like in Excel files or Word files or in you know, notes or any other kind of anything that's not encrypted. They will find those passwords. That's the first thing they're going to look for, and then that allows them to get into other systems or resources on the network and kind of work their way around to whatever it is that they're looking for. So how do you protect yourself, right? Don't reuse passwords on multiple systems, even if it's a throwaway account like Netflix or you know, something like that. It can still result in an attacker gaining access to your identity and moving through from that system into other systems. Also, don't use patterns. Hackers often get access to multiple passwords when targeting a victim, and then that means that they'll be able to see that pattern, and then they can expand their reach into other accounts of yours just using that same password, right? And lastly, avoid insecure password storage. As I mentioned before, don't store them in Outlook, don't store them in Word documents, don't store them in Excel files, and don't store them in your web browser directly. Those are not secure. And these are the first places that they're going to look when they get into a system, and they're going to try to find all the other passwords, and then they're going to go into other systems and make more damage. So how do you protect yourself? Well, you can get a password manager. So this is an additional program, usually has a small fee, and it encrypts your passwords so that nobody can access it other than you. right? And there's a master password, which you should keep to yourself. Don't write that down, just keep it to yourself. And the second way that you can protect yourself is to set up multi-factor authentication on all your accounts. It's pretty much offered everywhere now. And I would start with the most important accounts, anything to do with money or email or sensitive data, that kind of thing, and then work down to the sort of the less important information. They're all important to a level, but just some are more than others. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of things. Let's go now and dig into how to keep your Microsoft 365 account safe, right? And did you know that business email compromise is one of the main ways that hackers scam money from organizations? In 2020, 65% of organizations suffered a business email compromise. And then by 2021, 77% of organizations suffered a business email compromise. So that's quite a jump in just 1 year. And it has gone up again this year, although we don't have the final numbers just yet. But for 2022, it has definitely risen again. So this is a bit of an epidemic, and it is growing. So much so that the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre said that the amount of money lost to business email compromise scams continue to grow each year, with a 65% increase in the identified global exposed losses between July 2019 and December 21. So that's a big amount. And so what they're saying is the frequency is increasing and the cost is increasing. And so that means that people are running into these more often, and it's costing more to recover from them. Okay, so specifically with M365, if an attacker does get access to your account, what do they get? Well, so firstly, email, right? Including your saved items, your sent items, and your deleted items. Okay, they also get access to your contacts, your tasks, your calendars, and notes. And that's a lot of stuff. And so if you're saving passwords inside contacts or in notes, or if you've got anything on your calendar or your tasks that might be private or personal, hackers will have access to all those things. In addition, they'll be able to send messages as you. So that means they can send ransomware to all your contacts. I mean, can you just imagine if they sent a ransomware to all your personal contacts or your customers and your business partners and your employees? I mean, what would that feel like, right? You just gave them all ransomware? Not good. They can also create forwarding rules. So maybe they might create a forwarding rule based on the subject of invoice, which would send a copy to the attacker and then move the original into your deleted items. And this gives the attacker an opportunity to modify that message, maybe change around banking information or other critical pieces of it. And then they can place it back in your inbox as new, and you're none the wiser. And actually, if you're an attacker, this is a great way to find opportunities to trick someone into wiring you money instead of where they actually intended it to go. So be careful for that. And so how do you protect yourself from this happening? Well, there are a couple of ways. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication set up, and I will repeat this again and again, but yeah, it's a big one. It helps. Never log into your Microsoft 365 account from a non-work computer. Microsoft 365 accounts, just by their nature, because the people may also have access to files and other company resources using that login. If you go in from a non-work computer, like a home computer, maybe the kids are using it and you don't know what's on it, it could have been compromised. There could be somebody lurking on there. And then you go and log in to your work account from there. Now they've just got access to that, right? They just capture all the information. They've got your, maybe a keylogger that's recording all the passwords typed in. And so that's a really big one right there. A lot of people don't think about this. And then lastly, don't use free or public networks or even shared computers like in a hotel business center just to check your email before you head out. Yeah, don't do that. If you have to do something when you're on the road, use the hotspot from your like either a dedicated hotspot or the one that's built into your cell phone. Those are much more secure. Okay, so we've talked about these things. Now let's talk about how to avoid smishing. So here's a quick question. Let's say your name is Mary and you worked at ABC company, right? And you got a message like this. It says, "Is this Mary at ABC company? Would you respond?" Right. Well, if you got something like this, you just received a smishing message. And smishing, just for the record, it's a combination of SMS, like text SMS, and phishing. So it's smishing. It's basically phishing messages by SMS. And these attacks are on the rise, so much so that the US Federal Communication Commission recently issued a bulletin warning about these types of robo-text and smishing expeditions. But you're probably wondering, why are hackers doing this? Like, what do they care if they text me? Well, it's simple, actually. They're seeking information for access to bank accounts, websites, like social media, financials, Amazon, a shipping site, anything they can get their hands on, even phone apps and accounts. And they may even try to install malware right onto the device. So what do they get out of this? Well, they can figure out ways to transfer money out. They can figure out ways to make fraudulent purchases, and they may even sell your account access to other criminals, right? So how does this process work? Well, a text message is delivered to your phone. You open the link, or you confirm the phone number by replying. They send you to a convincing phishing page. You enter your information. Maybe it's a username and a password, or some bank details, maybe a multi-factor authentication code, and another hacker wins the lotto. That's how it works. So how do you protect yourself? Well, first off, don't respond to text or open links from known people, right? Attackers keep lists of numbers and names for future attacks. So the attacks will come from different numbers and different names in different areas. And once you get on those lists, you'll never get off. Never share sensitive personal or financial information, especially by text message. Always verify by other method, such as a phone number, known or published number, not the one you get in the text. And you can go to a known or published website to get that information for the organization. Always look out for misspellings and grammatical errors. And those are always a good giveaway. And don't forget that phone numbers can be spoofed. And what that means is somebody can send you a message that appears to come from a different phone number. So always validate suspicious or out of contact links, even from friends, because it could be actually from an attacker, not really from your friend. So how do you protect yourself? Well, remember, government agencies almost never initiate by a contact by phone or text. So when in doubt, call the local office or the main phone number and report it and find out if it's legit. You can report texting scams and spam attempts to your wireless carrier. And if you're the victim of fraud or receive targeted messages, you can file a complaint with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, or you can contact your local police and they can take it from there as well. Okay. So we've talked about all these things. Now we're going to talk about avoiding multi-factor authentication bypass techniques. So hackers can bypass multi-factor authentication. No protection is 100%, but you can help if you know how. So I'm going to go through a couple of the ways that they do this. Now, we've all had this happen, right? You get a notification on your phone that's to get into a particular piece of software or some application. But imagine getting 200 of those. And then a while later, you get a call from IT support and they tell you, oh, there's a problem and you need to approve one of those push notifications because that's the only way we can fix it, right? Well, it's called fatigue, multi-factor authentication fatigue. And it's just one of the ways that hackers are getting past multi-factor authentication. This allows them to bypass it and get access to the system with just the username and password. There's also something called a port out attack. And so this is where they trick your phone carrier into giving them your phone's SIM. And so all of a sudden your phone stops working, theirs starts working in its place, and now they can receive and text as you. It's pretty easy to detect because your phone just stops working. So if that ever happens, call your carrier immediately to find out why it stopped and to get it fixed ASAP. There's also a man-in-the-middle attack, and this is something we see quite often. This has been around for a long time, but this is a new twist on it. So it's pretty sophisticated, but basically you have some sort of MFA protected resource, such as Microsoft 365, just for example. So the hacker stands up a special server that looks just like that protected resource. And then they get you to go to a fake website where you enter your credentials, which they send to the actual site. Now, the MFA request comes back to you. You enter it on the fake site. They pass it through to the protected site, and it gives them access to the site instead of. Finally, they redirect you to a password failed page so that you're none the wiser that any of this ever happened. So you have to be very, very careful. This is why it's one of the things they're trying to do with the links in the email. They're trying to send you to the fake page to get this started. So how do you protect yourself from all this stuff? Well, never approve an unexpected push notification. Even if there's someone from IT support or says they're from IT support on the phone telling you to do this, don't do it. Don't ever give MFA codes to anyone, right? Avoid free and public internet and shared or public internet computers. This is something I was talking about before. Don't use non-work computers to access MFA protected resources. And don't click links from emails. You first examine them by hovering over them and then copy and paste them into your browser manually if you actually want to go to the site that goes to. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of things so far. Now let's talk about protecting personal information. So you store personal information on your computer. I mean, I don't know, let's think about some of the things you might have, right? You might have employee information, possibly payroll data, contracts with vendors or clients, tax files or filings, loan applications, credit card or bank statements, any of these kind of things, right? So there's a lot of stuff that people store on their computer that they don't really think about. Now, there's this technology called drive encryption. And so basically what it does is it takes the contents of your computer's hard drive and it converts it into gobbledygook that no one can read without the key to unlock it. And it works seamlessly if you're the correct user, because when you log into the computer, it automatically unlocks it and you can just work like normal. But if you lose your laptop, it's not as big of a deal because whomever finds it doesn't know your password and they can't access the data and decrypt the data off your computer. But what if you were phished? What if an attacker gets you to click on a malicious link in an email or some other way, and your computer's already logged in, and so therefore the drive is unlocked? It doesn't work very well against that, right? So let's think again about personal data. That means they get access potentially to all that data, right? Employee information, payroll data, contracts, tax files, loan applications, credit card data, or bank statements, what have you, right? They've got access to all of that. So what do you do with that? Well, you need to store that kind of data in some sort of an encrypted vault, right? And this is a little different than BitLocker or the drive encryption. And it's because that is automatic. This is not. So this is an encrypted vault, and you only unlock it or encrypt it when you're accessing that data. And ideally, it's best if it automatically locks itself again after a certain period of time when you're done with the data, so that it doesn't get left open. You can also protect yourself by having BitLocker drive encryption installed. This is something that's in Windows, certain versions of Windows, and you can turn that on. And you can, and as I said, you can get the encrypted vault for your personal information. Okay, so we've covered all these things here. Now let's dig into knowing if you have a hacker in your environment, right? So I mean, how do you know? How do you know if you've been hacked? I mean, they don't exactly put up a red flag, or blast a message on your screen the moment that they get into your network. They tend to hang around for a while, observing, trying to get into other systems to see what they can get access to, because ultimately they're trying to get higher up in the network, get access to more things, right? So there's a couple of signs that would tip you off. So the first one is if your password gets randomly reset. If you're going through your day and your password stops working and then you have to reset it, and then maybe it happens again, that's a really good sign that somebody is going through and accessing your data. They're obviously resetting your password without you knowing, going into the account, and then of course that locks you out. So then you reset it, which sends them out, and it just kind of goes back and forth. So something is fishy there, and it definitely should be looked into further. Also, if your email signature gets updated, such as maybe a new phone number, a business name, or a job title shows up on there, that's a really good sign that somebody may have access to your account. Another good sign is if you suddenly get tons of spam, right? We call this a spam bomb. And basically this is used to distract victims so that they're sort of preoccupied with dealing with all the spam and the nonsense going on there, and it distracts them from looking at what's really going on. It's sort of like a magician, using sleight of hand, and look over here or don't look over here. That's what they're doing, right? Another thing that may happen is you get tons of pop-up messages on your computer, right? Or you may notice emails that you didn't send in your sent items. That's a big red flag right there. So what do you do about this? Well, immediately, and I mean immediately, contact your IT team or your security team, or if you don't have either of those, contact us and they'll help you with that, because these are very important. You should not let these go. So we've gone through all these things today. What next? I mean, getting all of this stuff is hard, right? You can see that it's a lot of work to make sure that you're on top of this and that you're actually protected. So if you want to know how you're actually doing, we have a third party that analyzes our own cybersecurity risk here at Centrion. And the assessments normally cost about $5,000. But I happen to have purchased 10 for clients, and I have 3 left that we can do today for folks that are on the training here. So if you're interested in that, just finding out how you're doing, you can get your free cybersecurity risk assessment. Just to www.centrion-it.com/executive, and we'll do that assessment for you. Now, you may be wondering if this is something you should be doing, and the answer is yes, because as the CEO or a higher level executive, you're really one of the only people that is going to be able to get this done in your organization. The rest of the staff are busy, too preoccupied with their day-to-day jobs. They're not going to be able to get this done. You're the one with the authority and the power to do it. So the answer is yes. The next thing is, you might be thinking you're already completely protected, but are you absolutely sure? Are you absolutely positive that you're completely protected as best you could be? If you can't say absolutely yes to that, then this is definitely something you're going to want to do. And lastly, we will not need any administrative credentials or any of your passwords to do this. We will not install anything on your system, nothing left behind. What we will do is analyze your security. We'll meet with you to review the results, and we'll give you the simple steps that you can take to protect yourself and your data. And again, if you're interested, just go to that website. So you're probably wondering now, hey, what's the catch? Why are you giving this away? There is absolutely no catch. It's basically just a group of us IT folks come together on a mission to help protect 1 million people from hackers and the devastation that goes along with it. And so performing these analyses is just one of the ways that we help the cause. So again, if that's something you're interested in going to do, just hit up www.centrion-it.com/executive, and we'll get that started for you. And I'm just going to take a quick break here and have a drink, and I'll read any questions and I'll get back to you. Okay, so we've got one question which came up, and that is basically, why should we bother with multi-factor authentication or MFA when it can be bypassed? And the answer is because it's the best technology we've got at the moment to keep people out. The problem with relying on just usernames and passwords is that they're easily stolen. Like it's for the hackers, it's so easy for them to trick people into just giving those up by putting up a fake website that looks like the login. And by having something that is not just a static thing like a username or a password, it changes constantly. You know, either it's on your phone or it texts you some a 6-digit code. There's something and it changes, right? So the thing is, what it works right now, but even if they get a hold of it, it won't work in 5 minutes from now, right? So it kind of eliminates that persistent access that they can, you know, kind of come back later. It is not perfect. There is no such thing as perfect in cybersecurity or frankly any kind of security. Our objective, and this is what we do for our clients, is we use a layered approach, right? And if you put up enough layers, it's the equivalent of you know, think about your home security. So, you know, you put a lock on the door, you've got an alarm system, maybe you've got cameras, you know, if you've got some high value stuff, maybe you've got a guard dog, you know, or you put a locked fence around the property. Like, you know, it's all about the layers, and the more layers that there are, the harder you make it for somebody to get through, the higher the chances are that they're just going to give up and go away, right? Because, you know, except for very, very high level, highly targeted organizations like governments or, you know, nuclear power plants or anything like that, people are probably not going to be motivated enough to go through all the hassle of jumping over all these obstacles, right? Really what they're looking for is low-hanging fruit, right? And so if you just move yourself a little further up that fruit tree, you know, make yourself not low-hanging fruit, chances are they'll leave you alone. And the more layers you can put in, the higher up the tree you'll make yourself. So basically that's what it is, right? So MFA, no, it's not perfect. I'm sure somebody will develop a better system and things will change as we go on. But for the moment, it's the best thing we've got. And as long as it's used correctly, and people don't abuse it and don't kind of you know, get that MFA fatigue, as I mentioned, where they just say, you know, accept, and they get tired of it, then it works pretty well, to be honest. It will stop probably 99+% of attacks, right? So it is very effective. It's not 100% though, no. But it's the best we've got for the moment, and we highly recommend it for everybody. So with that said, those were all the questions. Thank you for joining me today for the executive training, and I wish you a good afternoon. Take care.